come to ask you how you're doing these days. Didn't come to roll no stones away, no. I come to tell you that the end is nigh. I come to prophesy, yeah. You wanted a messenger and I've been.
You're gonna hear my pages shuffling, so it's gonna be like a real, newsroom here. It's like do the little thing on the table.
Sounds official.
Here we go. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Talk Fiction, a podcast dedicated to entertainment media's most overlooked underdogs, fiction writers. I'm your host, Meg Olders, author of the Waddy Award-winning YA novel C. Smile and creator of the dynamic Substack publication Stock Fiction. My guest and guinea pig today is none other than Jordan Petersen. That's Jordan, Jordan, Petersen, Petersen. Jordan pens the authentically explorative Substack Dispatches from Inner Space, which he calls a place where fiction and philosophy like to hang out and talk, and maybe starting a band, and which I call freaking awesome. He's also the author of the book Shadow and Fire, a short fiction anthology now available for purchase on Amazon, and he's co-founder of the high-energy audio production company Voltage. I promise to provide links to anything and everything Jordan and I are making and doing in the show notes, but without further ado, allow me to introduce my distinguished guest, Jordan Petersen. Jordan, you're here.
I am. What an introduction. I feel...
Did I do okay?
I feel so flattered. I love that.
Well, I'm so happy that it's you for this first one because honestly, I'm a nervous wreck. So this is great. So my purpose for this, I think, aside from just wanting to have a podcast and say I've had one, even if this is the only episode we make ever and it just has to go down in history, but I'm hoping it won't be the only one. One goal is that I just want to talk to all my favorite fiction writers that I've met on Substack and get to know them better, and also let other people get to know them better for those who are listening. And I also hope that, for me, it's about talking with other fiction writers. It's kind of like your thing about where fiction and philosophy meet and maybe start talking about like forming a band. It's kind of like, what do people who write fiction talk about when they get together? So like sometimes I imagine it'll be about actual fiction writing, and then other times I hope it'll just fly off course and it'll just be what it is. But I do have some, like, as I mentioned, guideposts for today's conversation, which we'll get to eventually. But I wondered first if you did your homework and you brought your celebration and your frustration to the table.
Oh man, it's funny. I forgot.
That's okay.
But I did think about it. And I was like, ooh, that's a great question. What are my celebrations? What is a good celebration and a frustration? And then I was like, I'll think about that later, and then I forgot to think about it later. So
no worries.
But honestly, I have to say, my celebration is that I did actually, in fact, get Shadow and Fire published last year, which I was not. Which was, I kind of slid under the deadline, like right in December. It's like, okay, and I just put it up
Christmas.
live on Kindle. Yeah, exactly. And I've been also pushing it forward, the print edition, which is exciting, all through Kindle because I wanted to keep it really, really simple. I haven't tried to publish anything for a long time, self-publish anything. So I was basically just taking all the lowest hanging fruit, but it still feels like a celebration, so I'll take it.
Absolutely.
And the frustration is that there turns out not to be enough time in the day, no matter what you do. there just isn't enough time in the day. The business that I started last year, it's going well. It's still stressful. It's still, we're still on the, razor's edge of survival, but it is surviving. That's great, but it's taking up so much time, and I don't have nearly as much time as I want for writing, which is always a hard thing to accept, even when you're using your time really well and we're being pretty efficient and pretty productive and you're not wasting time. You still just don't have the time that you want to do the things that you want to do. So there's my frustration. It's kind of, I feel like that's sort of phoned in, but it's all true. So
it's not really. I mean, and I feel the time one, and what's weird is I don't have like a successful business that I'm running.
Hey, I did not use the word successful.
Well, if it's alive, then it's successful.
Yeah.
I was just thinking today, and this could be a topic for another show at some point, but like if we just like eliminated the word like failure from our language, like how much better everyone would feel. I just feel like because it's an option always.
We'd find another word to abuse ourselves
Yes,
with.
we would. And we'd find like a million other words. So I'll quick share my celebration and frustration, which I also didn't prepare, even though I told you to. So just to give you like some short history of where this came from. So I took a course. This is back when kind of like I started this. I'm going on like year 3 now of doing this writing thing. It's like, this is my job and this is what I'm doing. But I took this year-long course for children's literature, actually, which is funny because I went in there writing picture books and I came out having written, 4 YA novels. That's when all that stuff happened in that one year. And our teacher did this at the start of every class. She had everyone share a celebration and a frustration. So I would say mine is that we're sitting here right now today doing this, like this talk fiction thing. Like it's been in my head since my first interview with Claudine, who you just interviewed with for her podcast. And that was, I've now done 3 interviews with her. And I think I've mentioned it a couple of times in my own posts. And it's just always been like sitting in the back of my head as something that I wanted to do. So I'm excited that we're here doing it. And I appreciate you being here and sharing all your cool, high-tech, fun things that are sitting in front of me on the screen right now that I hope are just working in the background. Frustrations. It's funny. I usually start with my frustration because they're easier to think of, but I did it backwards. I don't know. There's just too many, but I'll just give like a cute one and say that I'm frustrated that when we're done here, I can't give you a high five because you live on the other side of the country.
Just smack the wall,
Yes, I will. I'll just smack you in the forehead on the screen. That'll work too. Okay, awesome. So thank you for doing that with me. Fun little exercise to get us loosened up, as it were. So interestingly, since we just got all relaxed, the topic I've chosen for the day is friction, which I got from your recent viral post, the Notebook Rule, which I know you've chatted with.
It's a strong word for Substack virality.
I don't care. I went and saw the number of likes you had on there, and I'm like, holy shnikes, he wasn't kidding. So Jordan wrote a post recently, which he titled The Notebook Rule, and I'm going to ask him right off the bat to just kind of distill for us the message of that post and what you were trying to share with us and do for yourself in creating it.
I will do my best to summarize it briefly. I have not been very successful at summarizing it briefly, which is silly because it's not that complicated. So I should be able to summarize it briefly.
But you're also a writer, so we always use more words than we need to. But that's
exactly
fine. You have the floor, as it were.
Yeah, it's hard to edit yourself in real time, as I'm learning. And also, I listened back to that episode of the podcast with Claudine and was just mortified at how much verbal filler I used and how many times false starts, going back, starting the same sentence 6 times in a row. It's just, wow. You don't think it's that bad. And
after I listen to this, so don't worry about it.
That's comforting.
We have our things.
So the Notebook Rule is really my latest in a series of efforts to try to de-enslave myself to digital media. It started, I really, 2023 is the year I think discovered that my life was, had been dramatically worsened, over the course of almost my whole life by kind of an overindulgence in media and of various kinds, and realizing that all of my so-called addictions throughout the years, whether it was like games or TV or whatever, it was all basically digital media. And so trying to figure out a way to get a handle on that, and also having done a lot of research and reading and understanding the sort of broader attention economy and the way the technology works and all this stuff, knowing that like this was not going to be an easy thing. This was not like, making a decision to just like use less media or something. It was there needed to be kind of like a radical shift in my posture toward technology. And the notebook rule is kind of an iteration of something that I tried a few months ago, at the suggestion of an author named Justin Murphy, who just sort of off the cuff one day just sent an email out to his subscribers. I've been a subscriber for a while to his newsletter. And he just suggested something that he'd been trying, which was making a deliberate decision before you use your computer. And then when you're done doing that thing, you like close the computer to walk away, and then you can walk back and use it again, but you have to make a deliberate decision, etc. And I did that for like a couple of weeks, and it was pretty life-changing. And then, I slid back into old behaviors and kind of gave up on it. And I was like, I need something that's more tangible, something that that in the practice of it will reinforce itself, rather than, being something that I have to sustain some discipline for. And so I came up with the notebook rule, which is basically the same thing, but physicalized. And so, and I have, the notebook right here. Here's yesterday's, kind of scribbling down of tasks and ideas or whatever. And it's really about saying, listen, if there's, I'm not going to, there aren't very many things that I'm going to completely give up doing with the computer, especially because my whole job is sitting in front of a screen. So it's really about trying to create some friction between me and using technology. Right now I'm trying to use the notebook as basically a bridge to the screen. So if I need to get to a screen, I will have to walk across the bridge of writing something down, whether that's, a couple of words or a whole sentence or whatever. Just, this is what I'm about to do with the screen before I use the screen. That's the idea.
Yeah. I just, for whatever reason, the self-discipline practice that popped into my head was like, if you are in the habit of hitting the snooze button on your alarm clock, you move it to like the next room or something that makes you get out of bed to do it. Yeah. So it stops being like a muscle memory thing. So it kind of reminds me of that a little bit, but on a smaller scale in my case. So I did pull a little, and this is the quote that I emailed you immediately. I was like, okay, so this is what I want to talk about when we talk. So I'm just going to read that quote out loud rather than to myself, because this is a podcast. So you wrote, "We are at our most human when we make deliberate decisions based on our deepest held and considered values. That kind of decision-making takes a lot of energy. It creates a lot of friction, but it is what makes us human." So this also sort of reminded me, because you read Amy Letter's newsletter, which is fantastic.
Yeah, she's so good.
And I'll put a link to it in the notes because everybody should be reading it. But she had written a post about giving up Amazon.
Mm-hmm. And I remember that. I read that post.
And that was like a tough thing. And I had done it a while back. So I was like, you can do this. You got it. Like, I felt good that I had been able to like do that as well. But I've had other things that I haven't been able to walk away from. And what she talked about a little bit in the post was like, walking out your door and getting in your car and driving to a store and dealing with a person. That's like the human stuff that we don't do anymore. Yeah. And then we wonder why we can't deal with people in situations anymore, because they've made it too easy for us to not do that. So what I've written here is my next question. I'm just going to get to that now. So I wrote, is this need for or addiction to frictionless input, which is what we get when we're sitting on our phone? It's just, there's no work to it. It's going into our brains and we're sitting there taking it, basically. So is that part of the reason it's becoming harder to sell fiction or even get people to read it for free? Because we're sitting here trying to get people to read our stuff. So, is fiction, like real human interaction, just harder for people to take in or deal with? So people are willing to dismiss it in favor of this lesser form of, I'm not going to call it lesser form. I should, though, because it really is. The input is less work. So do you think that has like any connection to why it's getting harder for storytellers to get their stories into people?
Absolutely. I think it's always been hard, though. And I think it's been true for a long time that the people who produce and consume the highest quality media, whatever it is, books or TV or film, the people who produce and consume that have to find each other, and it's a little bit of work to find each other. And I don't think, I think that we tend to look at the outliers and think, oh, like it used to be so much better. But I think that the super famous, successful, best-selling like works of great fiction have always been the outlier. And so I don't think that, I mean, yes, I think that, it is harder in some ways to find readers. I think the publishing industry is absolutely fundamentally broken in so many ways, and I'm quoting people who know better than me on that. Like it seems to me that way from the outside, and not having really tried to work with traditional publishing, but listening to all those who have, and seeing kind of how that works, and knowing too that just how popular really are bookstores anymore. Like just it's very very hard. It seems to be a shrinking audience of people who are serious readers. That said, I want to say I think it's important for me to lead off with not being the right person to ask about this, because I haven't accumulated much of an audience for my own work. I've only barely started trying. And I have a lot of opinions about what audience building is, what it looks like, what's like, how to do it well and how not to do it well. I loved your recent post on becoming a quote unquote influencer.
Yeah, because I have so much knowledge about how to do that, right?
Well, no, I mean, and
the blind leading the blind.
Yeah, it's just the idea though that so much of attention is being gobbled up by crap, by nothing. And it's, and everybody's a victim of this. Like, if you look at the lives of so-called influencers, like it's pretty awful. And most of the people who, wind up kind of catching that car after they chase it, realize like, oh, this is not what I thought. And it's a terrible game that sort of abuses everyone. But I would say that the shorter way of saying this is that, I think it's always going to be true. It's for the foreseeable future that shallow, short attention span stuff is going to dominate like the economy of media. It's just going to. And so we just sort of have to accept that and say, but so, the 5 people who have read something that I wrote that was kind of obscure and like not that mass interesting or whatever, but who really, really loved it and then talked to me about loving it, who would never have read it without me having published it on Substack, for instance.
Right.
Like that to me is worth however many thousands of shallow, likes or clicks or views or plays on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever. And I think that that's the thing that I'm kind of bending toward. Like the question of the economics, I think is a very, very challenging one that I do not feel qualified to talk about. But as far as like the value, just like the human, and we're talking about humanity, like the human value of like trying to produce something worthwhile and then having that connect with anyone, literally anyone in a meaningful way, like a deeply meaningful way. I think it's about shifting the focus of like what we're even trying to do and like what we think is valuable. Anyway, that feels
That's
very
good.
meandering and rambling, but I hope
well, and now it's gonna make me ask a different question that I was planning to ask, because a couple of things came up while you were chatting in my head. So one of them was the difference between, so I have a book on Wattpad that, just won this award, and that's a big deal.
Which I just started reading. I've been meaning to.
Oh my God.
And I'm so excited too, because I've never read anything on Wattpad. So like you're literally the reason that I even like started an account and started reading something on Wattpad. So congratulations on that. You have converted me to the platform. It's really I'm stoked. It's really fun. I can't believe it took me this long.
Yeah, well, and so what I'll say about it is, it's definitely, and again, even though I'm on there and things are happening there for me now, like I'm not an expert on the platform and how it works, but it feels very much algorithmically driven, to the point where this book was invisible until it won this award. And now people are seeing it because it's showing up for them and because they know it won this award. But like the engagement over there is very different. So I can see that people are viewing it either by the fact that my view number goes up or because people will vote on the chapters. Rarely are people commenting. And when they do, it's kind of in a, I said this to someone else, it's almost like when you're watching like a soap opera or something and you're just like yelling at the screen. Like it's those kind of comments. Like they just like, they hear a character say something and they just have something to say about it. So
I
it's
love
less,
that.
it's so much different than Substack. And they're both good and positive. But what I was going to say about like sort of the friction piece, I'm starting to realize, because I've had a lot of sort of angst and stress as of late about like what I'm doing with my writing and what I'm failing to not, I just use the word failing. Damn it. I just took it out of my vocabulary. And I put it back in. What I'm not managing to do, which is, you know, work on anything outside of Substack. Like it's become a little bit of an addiction for me. And it's hard now. See, like you were talking about how we the people on, you know, the outskirts of this who are creating, you know, what we think is meaningful stuff and trying to get 5 people to look at it. When you find your 5 people, like, I don't want to go now. Like I got to cling to these 5 people, like for dear life. And so I'm having this moment where I'm like, I think at some point I need to sort of step away for like a big enough chunk of time that I can get to some of these other things, or at least start working on them and commit to them to the point where like I want to follow through on them. Like right now I'm just like dipping my toes in all these things. Like this is a toe dip here. Like I don't know if I'm going to keep doing this. I'd like to, but it's one more thing, you know, and it's one more thing to balance.
Yep.
So for me, like the friction is there on Substack, like, and it's good and bad. But I just know that like my outlook on things has not gotten better since kind of joining the social piece of, you know, I make something, you respond to it. That instantaneous feedback is so gratifying because like for years you're sitting here writing. I mean, I wrote all those books, you know, huddled up in my basement and nobody read them. But what I said to my husband the other day was, I'm like, that might have been the last time I really, really enjoyed writing, was when I was sitting there by myself and it was just for me. So, but now, and this is me jumping to my, like one of my last questions, I think I brought this up later, but I'll bring it up now. Like, can you come back from it? Like, I think it's a trust thing. Like I have to trust that I'm building these, you know, relationships and this sort of group of people that's interested in what I'm doing. And I should trust that if I walk away for what amounts to like no time and the way things work now. Yeah. I mean, honestly, if I go away for a month, no one's going to even notice. But for me, it feels like a lifetime of like missed opportunities to connect with those people that I found. So like, it's like kind of like you got bitten by something, you know? So it's like this, and I don't want to view it as a bad thing because it's been really good for a lot of reasons, but like just psychologically and emotionally, my attachment to the writing now has shifted in a way that I don't know how to get back to that, you know, ground zero where I'm just like, I'm going to quit my job and write books. Because that's what I want to do, Jordan. I just want to write books.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then like people in my life will be like, so just write books. I'm like, but A, B, C, D, E, F, G, like I need to have all these other things to be able to say, yes, I write books for a living, air quotes, in case this is just an audio. Do you know what I mean? So was that a question for you? I don't know. That might've just been me going off on a tangent, but I guess what I'm saying is once you add the piece of knowing who the people are on the other side, like, I don't know, maybe it adds like a social element to it that feels more fraught than when you just have a bunch of like, you know, like on Wattpad, it's just like no one goes by their real name. No one has a real profile picture. They're basically like these little like cartoon characters just shouting stuff at your book and putting a star on it. And you're like, that's easier to deal with, I think. Like, it's just easier to say, great, that's getting attention. People are enjoying it. Yay. But there's no there's no personal connection there. So maybe I'm asking you, like, which do you prefer? Is one more ideal than the other in terms of like not losing the joy piece of what you're doing, or not losing the reason you started doing it in the first place?
I think
That was a lot. Sorry.
I
That was
think
my turn to go off.
my main thought here is that there are basically two sides. If we're talking about writing, there are basically two modes of interacting with the craft of writing, both of which are like really necessary, but they compete with each other, I think, really profoundly. And one tends to just like shut the other one up. So like the first one is what you experience when you sort of just like holed up and like wrote on your own in isolation for whatever, and you loved it. You loved like the craft of writing. You loved the experience, and I'm sure it wasn't always easy, or it wasn't always gratifying. I'm sure there were moments of frustration, but overall, it was something that was really beautiful. And then you went to Substack and you started publishing stuff, and suddenly there are people now to talk to, and there's this, and there's branding, and there's strategy, and there's back and forth communication, and there's all these other things to consider when you're trying to figure out how to get your work in front of people. And I think that fundamentally is just a different mode of work. It's a completely different end of the spectrum of like what it means to write things and try to get people to read them, or interact with people who are reading them. And so whether it's Wattpad or Substack, like I don't think it actually matters that much. Yes, the interactions are very different, but at the end of the day, what you're engaging with is the sort of social connection thing. You're also engaging with the apps themselves. Big Substack, as I love Substack deeply. I think it's amazing, and it sounds like I'm about to, more or less love Wattpad for a different set of reasons. But both of these are platforms with their own economic interests and their own efforts to try to capture their audiences enough to literally survive. Because the game is, it's not tuned to serve us. I mean, I think Substack does its best to try to like create value for writers, and that's wonderful. But it's not like, Substack isn't designed to incentivize you to go into a hole and write. Like Substack is designed to incentivize you to publish a lot and to interact with people, because it's essentially maximizing that end of the spectrum. So Substack itself, as an app, as a community, whatever, is going to become very seductive, and it's going to it's going to crowd out and overpower the other side, which is the side that needs to essentially say, no, like I need to get into my dark corner, and I need to write by myself for long periods of time, whether that's, hours or days or weeks or whatever. And so I think just being aware of that, to bring this back to the idea of friction, and that, anytime you get in front of a screen for literally anything, there are going to be things that are designed to reduce friction. There's going to be things that are designed to get you to behave in a way that is beneficial to the thing that you are using, less so than to yourself. And that's also true on Substack, and it's also true on Wattpad. And so I think, creating those boundaries, whatever that looks like. And my thought with Substack is like, yeah, you have like I would say, I know neither one of us have like a giant audience on Substack, but we also have like, it's not nothing. It's not nobody. Right. And there are people that there's lots of people that matter very, very much to us. And I would say for the most part, like all the people, I mean, anybody I personally know, who is subscribed, whether I've met them on Substack or whether I, knew them outside of it and then they came and became a subscriber, like I care about them all very, very much. So that there's a huge draw there for me to want to, do good things for them. Yeah. Exactly. I want to be a good writer, and I want to get praise from them, and I want, I want these are very, very strong motivations and strong desires, and Substack is amping all that up. It's like, yes, this is great. This is great for us.
Look how much praise and love you can get if you stay here all day, every day.
Exactly. So for me, the project then is, okay, what do I need to do to create the appropriate amount of distance or boundaries between myself and Substack, so that I am maximizing the benefit it is to me in my life and the benefit I am in the lives of my subscribers, but also protecting that sacred space around writing, around the work of writing that does not need Substack. It doesn't need anything but either pen and paper or a blank document on my, on my screen, or I've, been using Scrivener for my novel, but like, it doesn't need anything but words. And but it's very hard, because that's, I've, in my own mind, and I think out loud maybe a couple of times, have classified writing as one of the highest friction activities that a person can do, because it requires an immense and endless number of decisions. So you're doing is making decisions. You're just deciding to death in order to get words on the page. You have to decide every letter, every word, every sentence. You have to go back and decide again and again and again. And so it's an extreme amount of work, an extreme amount of friction, as we've been talking about. And I'm not going to want to do it unless I put barriers between myself and the things that are seductively saying there's no friction here. Like, it's so much easier to come do this stuff than it is to do that thing. So yeah,
it's, for me, and I've tried to sort of instill some like I've gone as far as to use that Freedom app to sort of like make it so I can't go on Substack. But I cannot tell you, Jordan, how many ways I've found to get in there anyway. It is sickening. Like, when I see myself do this stuff, I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, I just wish there was like some parent figure like standing over me, like slapping me on the wrist every time I do it. But it's so, you're right. The word seductive is like really good, because it's just so damn tempting to go in there, even if you're just going like, what's everybody else talking about? Like, what am I missing? Like, you don't want to miss stuff, but meanwhile, you're missing stuff that's happening in your real life, like all day. Like, I mean, I'm in my house by myself right now, but I could be petting my cat. I could be doing any number of other things, or I could be writing. But for me now, what happens is, anytime I think about writing anything, I'm thinking about the people that might read it. So that for me is like a weird, I'm not sure how you get that piece out of your thinking. Like, you can put in like physical, like actual boundaries where you're like, can't go to your computer today. Like, that's a boundary. But like, your brain is kind of boundaryless. It's going to do what it's going to do. So like, for instance, I wrote that post with all the stories that I didn't write this year that I wanted to write. You know what I mean? It was just like a big long list of titles. I had titles for them. Some of them I had started writing, and there were a lot of essays in there and stuff that I just haven't followed through on. And then like, I think about other things, like maybe I want to write a piece about XYZ, but I know it's not a good fit for stock fiction. And so I've already decided not to write it because of that. And that's just ridiculous to me. Like, I need to be able to write something with a different purpose and feel good about it, even if it never gets any eyeballs on it. And that's the piece that's like hard to, it's so dumb. We're just coming around in circles, because it's the attention piece that's hard to walk away from. Like, I could spend a week writing a lot of words that no one would see, or I could spend a week writing the same number of words and have people tell me they're good. It's like, which option would you choose? Like, the option where someone tells you they're good, or the option where you go, what the hell am I doing with my life?
Well, I think you have to create, some space for yourself to ask hard questions and to answer them without the influence of the thing that has ulterior motives. Even if that thing is not evil, right? It's like, so, you have to be able to turn off Substack for a second. And yeah, it's still spinning in your brain. But if like you go into a room without a computer and you sit down with a pad of paper and you just think, what do I actually want right now? Right. Then you can start answering those questions. But you have to kind of get, this is my whole argument about, this is where the notebook rule came from, is that, I don't trust myself to be able to make decisions in a way that reflects my humanity, even in like a completely imperfectly broken way. Like, I am inconstant and confused and wrong most of the time, but at least it's me, right? But I don't trust myself to even start to even attempt to make those kinds of like base level human decisions if there's a screen in front of me, because that screen is going to influence my decisions. It's going to influence how I feel about things and what I want. It's incredible how, there are certain things that I want when they're in front of me, and then when they're not in front of me, I don't think about them at all. And this is so.
You froze on me.
Oh, how about now?
You're back now. Yeah.
Okay.
I got you.
So yeah, there are things that I want that there are things that when they're in front of me, I want them, and when they're not in front of me, I don't think about them at all. And so the screen is this sort of infinite carousel of things that I want. And if I just have to close that down to then make decisions. So for instance, like, I have, because I'm not you, and because it's so much easier to look at somebody else's situation and like find solutions for them than it is to like figure out crap for your own life.
Right.
My first thought when you said like, oh, I wanted to write this thing, but like it wouldn't work for stock fiction. I'm like, who cares? Like, go write the thing, and if it's really good, put it on stock fiction and call it out. Be like, this isn't what I normally do on stock fiction, but like, but those are separate. Those are separate decisions. Like, if you feel as a writer, you have to honor the part of you that does not give a shit what other people think. You have to that part of you is what writes stuff. I mean, the thing is that part that is your writer. That's the part that produces pretty much everything. It's like the other part of you that cares what people think is very, very loud and very dominating, and it has a lot of opinions about what the part of you that doesn't care should do. And so you have to like essentially say, hey, like, and this is I think it's a constant internal battle for me, for myself, like definitely for sure. Still, like, I have to like sometimes sit down and be like, this. Like, all of these thoughts that I'm having right now, all of these like worries and stresses and considerations of all these people or whatever, all these externalities that like I have to say, I get it. Like, all of you all have your things, your cares, whatever, but like you need to go over there now and shut up, because it's time for I think almost think of him as like the little boy, because I started writing when I was just a pretty young kid, and I did it for the pure joy of it. Like, I didn't care. It was a while, right, before I realized, like, ooh, maybe I want somebody to read my stuff. And then it was like this, and then that's the drug you never put down. Right. And but there's a part of me that just like wants to get into that pure raw creation and loves it, and it's like, and loves the challenge of it, and loves the friction, like loves how beautiful and hard and sublime it is. And just wants to get in there and create beautiful sentences and challenging characters and crazy plot situations, and just like wants to just write. But that part of me does not care what other people think. And if the part of me that does very, very much care what other people think gets in there and like is like backseat driving for that, like then nothing, like it doesn't work, Right. So anyway, it's
That's definitely the thing. And I've found, like, because for years and decades, I'll just say decades because I'm that old, I like avoided this sort of social piece of this part of my creative life. Like, I did theater and music and things like that, and those are more communal activities. I mean, you can't really do those by yourself. You're an ensemble piece, you know what I mean? But with this, I just didn't share with anybody. And like, even like my husband and stuff, like nobody saw what I was writing. And I sort of loosened up on that a little bit. Like, my first couple of novels, I gave them to like my husband and my parents and my sibling, who, to be honest, like, my parents are not the audience for my YA novels, but they read them and they continue to read them. But it's like, I don't even know where I was going with this. I think it's just about when you add this stuff, this digital dope, as you say, into your repertoire or your system, I guess, those voices that are not helpful, they get like way louder. Like, I have sort of developed, and I've always been a little bit of a self-defeatist, but like it's worse now because I don't know. This is the thing I was, again, talking with my husband about, because I pretty much have, this existential crisis like every other day. So he's very supportive and listens to me and gives me good advice that I promptly ignore. But I'll bring it up for other people in case it's helpful. So it was about, oh my God, I just totally lost my train of thought. This is where I'll be editing, by the way.
Yeah,
We were
I
talking about
edit my
being
own podcast to
self-defeated.
death. And I think honestly, Meg, what it sounds like is that there's a painful process of adaptation that you're just going through. Like, and you are just
Yeah.
trying to figure out, like, how do you exist? Like, how does that, and this is something, I mean, honestly, it was 25 years for me of like failure mode of like, how do you,
No, it's not a word. I'm
it
scratching
is very
I'm
much it.
dubbing
Well,
in a different-
of failing to create enough distance between the part of me that cares what people think and the part of me that just wants to write and doesn't care what people think. That when those two parts were so sort of enmeshed, and when frankly, and I've often called the other one like the inner critic, because the critic cares a lot, right, what other people think, and has a lot to say about whether or not what you just did was any good, right? So like, and as long as that voice just got stronger and louder for like so long, to the point that I got to the point where I felt like I couldn't write anything. And I think that, you know, so I wish when I started the novel that I'm writing now, I started it with as a recovery tool. Like, I was like, I knew that I needed, like, if I was ever going to get my mojo back as a writer, I had to like figure out how to write for myself and for nobody else. So what you sort of started doing, I like came back to after a couple of decades of like just, you know, neurosis and like self-hatred and confusion, and you know, and I, you know, was like, I think that what I need is to just like go write this book that I've been wanting to write for my whole life, and never have, because I didn't, because the critic inside of me was like, you're just not good enough to write that book. Like, you can't, like, and no one will ever read it. And it's stupid of you to even think about it. So here's a bunch of projects that you're allowed to work on that like might, you know, whatever. And then, you know, and then I'd go work on those things and then abandon them because, you know, it was just a terrible relationship. Anyway. And so it sounds to me like you are confronting this like really fully because of the Substack audience and because of all these. It's like you're in the deep end now. Like, oh, now you have all like this sort of sublime, untouched thing is now, you know, having to contend with reality. And so you just need to learn how to create boundaries. Like, and it's going to be a slow process. But if you recognize that dynamic does exist, that there is a part of you that needs to just get left the freak alone. And that the other part of you can just go F off while that part does its work and enjoys the creative process. Like it just takes a lot of practice. Like, but you can do it. And part of like a piece of that is going to be, and you could even let your Substack audience know, hey, I'm taking a 1 or 2 month sabbatical for this reason, because I need time away from this thing that just fuels the part of me that cares what people think, which is not a bad part. It's not bad to care what people think. It's just that part can't, like, you know, take over. And so sometimes to get distance, you have to say like, all right, I'm going to starve that part out for a while so I can like strengthen this other part that just needs to just do the creative thing and just not care.
Right. I also think for me, taking out the end goal piece, I mean, it's important to have goals, but it's that self-defeatist part of me that like, I'll start something and I'll already see the end of it, and the end is never good. You know what I mean? It's that sort of worst case scenario leap.
Right.
And honestly, like, it wasn't my intention for this to turn into like a therapy session, Jordan. So I apologize.
I think that's what most podcasting is. I think most podcasting is just talk therapy.
Here's what, I'll just call it talk therapy. Here's what I will say about this past year. And it's been difficult for other reasons, like outside of writing. It's just been a year for me. And so like, I've learned a ton about how I operate from the interactions that I'm having with other people. So I think in total, it's going to be a positive. It's going to be a win for me because, and they're weird, like subtle things that I'm just like you said, when you go in and you know the stuff that you're looking at is going to pull you in and distract you. And I know, and this is like a weird thing, and I've considered writing about it now a couple of times, like it doesn't motivate me to read about other people's success stories. Like,
it's not meant to.
Like, but some people, and maybe they're faking it, but I swear some people are like, oh, it's so wonderful to see like this person get this,
they're
this,
faking
this.
it.
Like,
that's totally a front. No,
yes,
people
and
don't get inspired by other people's success. People just feel bad about themselves.
It's I love you so much. So I'm so glad I chose you to talk to you about this. But no, this is what I've learned, but like people will send them to me, and I know they're like, my mother does this sometimes, like, oh, this woman sounds just like what you're doing. And like, she'll send me this article. And I've learned now, I'm like, no good can come of me reading this. Like, and I
In that
know
way
that
lieth madness.
well, yes. And I know that the people in my life are doing it to like boost me up, but it does the exact opposite for me. It's like, I want to hear stories, and maybe I need to start writing them about people who don't get the thing and are okay. Like
Yeah.
there's not enough celebration of mediocrity. And I feel like maybe we talked about this a little bit in our first chat that we didn't do anything with as far as sharing it with other people. But and it's not like my goal is to be mediocre. I don't think I am mediocre, like to start with. Which is
No,
a good
you're an
place
excellent
to
writer.
start.
And I also I should say that there's a big caveat there where when I say people's success stories don't inspire, like that's true mostly for strangers, but like
Right.
for people that I know, their success stories are absolutely inspiring because I don't necessarily relate to, or I don't put myself in their like I know enough about them to know that they're different from me, and their
Right.
success I just am like really happy for them, which is inspiring. And like, and it makes me think, oh, maybe I can like be successful in my own way because like,
Right.
you know, but that's a different thing than like, you know, looking at somebody who you're sort of like vicariously putting yourself into, like you're thinking of them as the protagonist of a story, which we do, like we vicariously put ourselves in the shoes of the protagonist of any story, and we're thinking like, ooh, maybe that could be me, but then like we logically know it can't be, and then it's just depressing. So it's like, no, you have to like, there has to be some dimension and some complexity and some authenticity there. So like I find like when you talked about your story of when you shared your success on Wattpad, that was like so inspiring because like it was completely like I knew enough about, you know what I mean, like there wasn't this sort of like weird thing. I was like, oh, I'm trying to do that and maybe I can, like, no, like it was a totally different situation.
Different
like
thing.
yeah, I mean it did inspire me to think, oh, maybe Wattpad is actually like, maybe it's actually a good idea for this giant novel that I've been writing that I think actually does not belong on Substack, and I don't know what to do with it. So in that element, it was like very inspiring, but like practically inspiring. Anyway, so yeah, lots of thoughts there, but I can relate for sure.
All right, where are we on time? We're getting towards the end here, so let's see. Obviously, we'll probably need to chat again because I'm not sure I got to anything that I set out to get to, Jordan, but we knew that was going to happen. So, this is what happens when fiction writers talk. That's the whole point. We go on all kinds of tangents and we reveal way too much about ourselves. Let's see. I'm not going to touch that question because that's too big. Let's see. Did I have anything else? Okay, so I'll just ask this one. It's kind of coming back to some of the stuff we've talked about. And you and I have talked about this separately too. Like the whole, I'll just read it the way I wrote it and maybe it'll come out of my mouth. So do you think it's possible, and I'm using the word succeed in quotes, to succeed as a fiction writer without the requisite dope, essentially? Like I've gotten a lot of pressure from people who I think are looking out for me, but like, you know, it's the whole, you gotta get on TikTok. You gotta have some kind of audio or video element to your authorship. You gotta have a website. You gotta this, that, and that. And it's like, I'm chipping away at some of those things, but I want to believe that like, and like, what did we say? Like, it was like the last time we were talking, you said something like, about how like everybody's success story is going to look different. Oh, it was about you, like people like you and I who want to do the creative part and don't necessarily want to do the self-promoting jazz and spend all of our time in that arena, like looking for an agent and that kind of stuff. Like there are stories of people who just do the work and then they meet a person who connects them to a person, and then suddenly they're that step higher where they need to go. So like, again, I feel like the narratives around these alternative routes to success are like missing for me. Like I want to hear more about them because that's what I'm hoping is going to be what my story looks like. So is this a question? I don't know. Speak to that, Jordan.
Well,
Do you agree?
I can speak to anything. I may not do so with any kind of authority or intelligence, but I can certainly speak to
Neither of
anything.
us has any authority.
I will say
Authority
this.
or authority.
I think that I think that anytime you hear somebody saying, "Oh, you have to do this or you have to do this," it's bullcrap. Like, I think you don't have to do anything.
Exactly.
What you have to do is you have to work. You have to work. And there's a, and there are things like there are shit sandwiches to eat no matter what you do. And
or dog poop is what I refer to
and
it.
so you're picking which shit sandwich you want to eat, which one you can choke down, and and hopefully there's some elements to the hard parts that you don't want to do that are in fact enjoyable and gratifying sometimes, or else you can't sustain it. And so, for instance, I'm thinking, okay, I want to shine a light on what I think is an example from your own life that is a pretty good illustration of how this can work, or how it does work. You wrote a book without really knowing where it was going to go, or who was going to read it, or how you were going to get it out there. And once you'd written the book, at least a pretty good draft of it, then you started asking those questions. And then it's, that's a different kind of, like we were talking about, it's a different kind of work than writing the book. So it's like, there's a part of you that wrote the book, and now there's a part of you that's like, okay, what do we do with this thing now?
Right.
Like, it's time to, it's like, it's pretty good. Like, what do we do with it?
Right.
And then, and then you won a Waddy Award. And like, was that inevitable? No. Like, was it the only route? No. Like, but it happened. And the only reason it happened is because there were two sides of it. There was a side of it that you wrote the book, and then there was a side of it you were trying to figure out what to do with the book. And it's the same thing with any piece of writing. Like, there's a side of it where you gotta do the work, you gotta write the thing, whether it's a book or an essay or a short story or whatever. And then once you have the thing, you're like, then you can like engage the other part and be like, do you have some advice for me? Like,
Right.
self that cares what other people think. Like, what do you think? What should we do with this thing? How should we get it out there? And then that could be really exciting and fun, and also a slog and painful and frustrating. But like, here's the thing. I'm probably never going to get on TikTok. Watch, like, next month I get on TikTok. I'm probably never going to get on TikTok because I don't like TikTok. I think it's awful. I like Substack. I think maybe I'll like Wattpad. Like, there are things that I do like. I love, if you can't tell, I love guesting on podcasts. I love it.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. And so there's a big old shit sandwich that I'm probably going to have to eat at some point, of going out and trying to find a bunch of podcasts to get onto. And there's a lot of that process that's a slog and that I won't like, but it will be in service of something that I very much do like, which is being on podcasts. Like, when I actually get to like show up and just like talk to people on mic, it's great. I love it. And so so that's something that, like, I know for a fact. I mean, I know a mutual friend of ours who I've invited on my podcast, which has very few listeners. It's the podcast associated with my Substack, which I think I've done 3 episodes for, and I've been sitting on another episode for like 3 weeks that I haven't edited yet. Anyway, sorry, Josh, it'll come out eventually. But I invited another writer friend from Substack, who I will not name because I don't want to embarrass this person, but who decided that it was not for them. They were like, you know what, I don't like the idea of getting on a podcast. And I'm like, that's fair. So for that person, no way should they take the advice of, well, go get on a bunch of podcasts to promote your work.
Right.
Like, that's the wrong choice for them, right? So it really comes down to who you are, what you respond to, what feels good. I had a friend recently, was sitting down with a few friends, and we were kind of giving each other advice about how to overcome some problems or whatever. And he was,
Oh, good. So you're not just solving my problems for me.
and one of my friends said to this other friend, he said, well, I think you should try this or this. And the other friend said, oh man, I just get such a knot in my stomach when I think about that. I'm like, then you probably shouldn't do it.
Right.
Like, listen to yourself, like, listen to your body and the way you feel. And I'm not, I'm not so woo as to say that like every decision should be made based on like some whatever. But like, I think that there's a lot of value in trying to track what really repulses you, and
Right.
not convincing yourself that you have to go do that stuff versus like stuff that maybe makes you a little uncomfortable, but there's like something maybe attractive about it. Like maybe go for that, you know, like get over the discomfort, go do the thing that you think might be attractive, and maybe it ends up being awesome, and maybe it ends up being terrible. But you know what? It's like, there's so, you know, do you have to get on TikTok? No. Do you have to get on Facebook? No. Do you have to do you have to do anything? No. But there are things that you can do that you might like to do, and you know, and I think ultimately the question is, or the answer is yes. There are things, if you want to get your book in front of people, you're gonna have to work, but it's not the same work as writing, and it's not work that it's not the same work necessarily as you see other people doing. Like it's gonna depend on the author.
Absolutely. Well, I like this sort of image of having the two. So it's the challenge of sort of working for yourself and also being a creative person, because, you know, if we were all just busting with cash and resources, we'd have other people do some of this stuff for us, and we would just sit there and do the creative piece. But it's like, you kind of have to be the marketer, and you have to be the promoter, and, you know, the editor, and you have to be all those pieces. And we wonder why we're all polyfocal, as you say. Like, we're literally like embodying like 12 different people at any given moment. And this is why we have some stress and anxiety about our careers. But maybe I'll try to figure out a way to, I've thought about even doing it like by days of the week. Like, these days of the week are my creative days, and I cannot do this other stuff on those days. And it seems so simple. I don't know why I can't just do it, but it's something I've thought about doing, because it used to be that all I had to do was the creative piece, but now there's so many more pieces, and I'm trying to like just do them all at once, and that's exhausting. So
iterate, you know, there's probably not going to be one right answer. There's probably not going to be one, like a right answer that lasts for more than a week or a month or something, but try the days of the week thing. If that works, great. If it doesn't, then like try hours of the day, try, you know, like there's things you can do, and just try stuff out until it fits, you know? Yeah,
it's a good point. And stuff that fits somebody else is not necessarily going to fit me, because we're all different shapes and sizes. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, I feel like we've hit sort of like a point here on the hour, and on just the number of words that have come out of our faces. I hope this was like at least entertaining for you.
I've had a great time.
I feel like you did all the instructive leading of the conversation, and it was a good first run for me, just in terms of showing up and chatting with someone for an hour. And
good job, congratulations, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So
I don't care if you believe me. Fire is coming, fire is coming. Birds of the meadow, birds of the meadow. Fire is coming, fire is coming. Birds of the meadow, birds of the meadow.
Hey, loyal listener. If you made it this far, thank you. I hope you enjoyed spending the hour with me and my guest. If you liked what you heard, please let us know by hitting the like button, leaving a comment, or sharing this podcast, for lack of a better word, with your favorite people. Stock Fiction is a dynamic anthology of short fiction, essays, poetry, humor, and creative experiments written and produced by me, Meg Olders. If you're into the stuff I'm making, or you're just into supporting the person who makes it, I hope you'll consider becoming a free or paid subscriber today. Thank you. I'll see you next time.